You are now tuned into The Remedy, live with PD and the crew. Buckle up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Remedy Show with PD and the crew. I'm your host, Monday Dawsonville. I am delighted to be with you on this beautiful Saturday. And today we are going to talk about autism and some of the struggles and challenges within the Black community when it comes to autism. Our guests today, actually, we have two. Natasha King, who is a parent with a child dealing with autism. She's going to be joining us very soon. And of course, our very own licensed mental health counselor, Diana Niels Andre. So without any further ado, let's get started. All right. What's going on, guys? What's going on? What's going on?
Hello. Good morning.
Everyone, please take a moment to introduce yourself. We have Luby. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's been happening with in your life lately?
I mean, more than what people already know, because we've been doing this for quite some time now. Luby Myrtle, over here in Florida. I am I'm an attorney. I said it this time. And I am family. We've been doing this for quite some time. I pop in and out. I'm one of those families that you don't know who's really coming or not.
And
depending on what food is being served that day.
Thank you so much. Cynthia, what's going on in your world?
Besides my allergies, nothing much.
No, every Saturday you come here and talk about your
Listen. This is I have allergies all year round, but around spring and fall, it is my biggest and worst, It's like, you have a relationship with someone, it's like a hate and love relationship. That's my allergies, man. Around fall and spring. As a kid, I used to hate fall and spring. And then as an adult, I'm starting to love fall.
Yeah.
But my body's like, so. But it's raining here, so hopefully the rain will dry out the pollen. So I don't know. We'll see.
Correct. That's unfortunate.
Hopefully.
Well, thank you for braving the season and still show up on time for the show today. Yeah. Diane, this is your second time around. We are delighted to have you. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing lately.
Hey. Good afternoon. So, yes, I'm Diana, and what have I been doing? I've been busy building an empire, building legacies.
Yes.
I started my private practice actually in the midst of the pandemic, and I started renting an office space 3 days a week. And then that wasn't working out. God showed me a couple of things and I vacated ASAP, and I was able to actually rent a 2 office suite in November. And then as of March, I expanded to a 4 office suite. And I have over now 100 clients. I thought it was 50, but it's actually 100 plus clients.
Won't he do it? Won't he do it?
Yeah. I have a couple of therapists working with me.
We can tell.
I have a couple of therapists working with me. So we're social justice warriors, making sure that all of our people are being well taken care of.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Praise God for all the blessings in your life.
Yes.
And our guest today, first name and last name, Natasha King. Right, Cynthia?
Yes.
Natasha, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself real quick. What's going on in your life?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the program. My name is Natasha King, and I am the mom of two boys who both have autism, Ethan, who's 18, and Evan, who is 10. And so my life is very busy. There's always something going on. But today, I really wanted to come on and share my story and just give a little bit of hope for people who may, have to parent children on the spectrum. So I'm very excited to be here.
Indeed. And then, listen, Natasha, I want to say to you, we are so gracious that you respond positively to our invitation. I think it's going to be a great show. You're going to share with us a great wealth of information. And Diana, of course, you are here to provide some of the mental health counseling techniques that maybe we might need to know. I guess the question we want to begin with, of course, is as we look at autism, is we want to hear your story. You say you have two children, and
Yes.
both of them were diagnosed with autism.
With autism. Yes.
So, what was life like for you? Not only the first time around, but the second time around when you became pregnant and then you gave birth, and then when did you realize for both of them, or did you become an expert by the time you get to the second child to kind of look at some of the signs and say, wait a minute, this looks familiar? Tell us your story if you don't mind.
Well, my story is my husband and I lived in New York City, and you get married and your expectation is that you're going to start your family, right? So, we started our family. Everything was great. When you're pregnant, your prayer is, you want 10 fingers and you want 10 toes and you pray for a healthy baby. You never really think of praying, well, Lord, please don't let us have an autism diagnosis, because, you don't really hear about it or know about it until it happens to you and you have to deal with it, or, someone who may have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So our first child, Ethan, was developing what we thought was pretty normally. We took him, he was vaccinated on time, had his doctor's appointments. And then
Oh, we just lost her.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. She will be back. She will be back. So, Diane, why don't you tell us a little bit about here's the thing. When I was doing the research on this topic, one of the things that I struggle with is she's coming back. One of the things that I struggle with. Thank you for coming back, Dan. We're coming right back to you. One of the things that I struggle with, I was reading, and it says that according to the study, that you can't diagnose children before the age of 3. And that was kind of odd to me, because why wait till 3 before they can actually have a diagnosis? Because by then I'm thinking it's 3 years, or isn't it already too late to even begin that process?
No, what some people fail to realize is that autism is a communication disorder. And so when you're 1, 2, and 3, that's when you're learning to speak.
Mhm.
You'll have some kids who are nonverbal who do not actually begin speaking until they're a certain age. So they do not like to diagnose at such an early age. And even if you were to get a diagnosis, the likelihood of you being able to get services for that child is very, very, very low, because of the lack of professionals that does service that age population.
Correct.
But if you're thinking about developmentally,
Mhm.
you don't really know there's a developmental delay until they've reached that milestone, or they haven't reached that milestone. So at 3 years old, you still have kids who do not speak, who aren't communicating. However, there are rare cases where you do have children that are diagnosed with autism, because they are severely nonverbal and they're not making eye contact. They're not pointing while they're speaking. They're not engaging the way that you're expected to.
Okay.
So in those instances, you'll see a diagnosis for a child that young.
Okay. I
So it's probably
understand.
like one of those things where, you know, when you take your kids to the doctor, you always get that health check, or what is it?
Well check, yeah.
Wellness check, right?
Yeah.
You always check. They always ask you, when you speak, does the child follow you, or
Right.
when you point the finger when they're this and that? And I always thought that that was so annoying. Like, well, yes, of course, yes, yes, yes. You know, check off. But now that you're saying that, it makes sense to somebody who wouldn't really think that this is a big deal. But then once they check off a bunch of no, and it's like, okay, well, is this something that they're supposed to be doing? Would that be something that give the parent an indicator that, oh wow, okay, something could be wrong here? Like not wrong, but like, are there cause for concern if I have more no's than yes?
Yeah, absolutely. That's when the pediatrician would step in and they'll tell you. But a bigger indicator is if you already have kids, then you know, like for Zarina, like she's like 86, right? Because she has her brothers. Now, if she had the boys and she wasn't speaking and she wasn't communicating, you would have looked at Zarina and you would have been, there's something wrong with her, or she's not developing the way that she probably should.
I
Yeah.
think
For some context, Zarina is my youngest. She's
Oh,
3.
sorry.
Zarina
Okay.
is my youngest. She's 3, and I have 3 other boys, older boys, 10, 8, and 6. So she acts very mature for her age. That's what she was saying. So that's why. Yeah, I understand. But Natasha, I'd love to hear more. We got
Yeah.
cut off, so want to hear
yeah.
how the story
Um,
developed.
Yep, I think for us, we were lucky in that our babysitter was very used to working with children, and so she first kind of pointed out, "Do you notice that Ethan plays differently with things?" So instead of driving a car, he would line them up, maybe by the size or the color or the type of vehicle it was. Or when he came home, he wouldn't greet us anymore when I came to pick him up from daycare, or he would kind of just do things that was so robotic and not really natural for a child his age. And so, yes, we had where we did not have that communication piece, but there were some other things that were pretty normal for us. But then we noticed eating was difficult, like some sensory things he had a problem with. And she said, well, let's just see. I know of someone who has a child, with autism and showed some of these signs before. Why don't you have him assessed and find out what it is? Either he is or he's not. So luckily for us, he was tested very early, and we knew before he was 2 that he was on the spectrum. And New York is such a wonderful state if you ever have to parent a child on the spectrum, because the support services is just so great there. So imagine at 2, at that time, putting your child on a little bus with strangers, really, and other children, sending him to a specialized school to have therapy and ABA therapy. And then also having a whole slew of people like coming to your house every day. So we had speech, the OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, a special teacher, social worker, just everybody. So they kind of front loaded him at that very young age with early intervention. And all of these services were free in New York. And then as he met his skills, and we got that diagnosis, and we came up with an individualized plan for him and our family, and he met those goals, they started pulling back. And so in New York, they offer ABA therapy, which is, pretty much like a step-by-step therapy to manage some behaviors and just, give them goals that they can meet and have that positive reinforcement for them. And so I think we were lucky to have that so early. We were lucky, like God aligned things. We were lucky to have a provider who knew what to look for. Because as a new parent, we didn't have autism in our family prior to this. I had no idea what to look for. That he was diagnosed early, he got early intervention and all of these services. I remember, there were times where it was just so emotional for me. Like he had a speech therapist, and you would just assume it would be someone who's a female, but it's this big 6 foot tall, big guy come into our house. And he said, this is going to be very hot. And if you can't handle it, you can step away, you know. And I'd never forget, he would say to me, don't give him the snack until I get here, because I want him to learn to ask for it. So they started with signing, you know, more applesauce, or no, more cheese crackers or whatever. And until he said that, then, you know, he would withhold that snack from him. And then eventually he was like, more, you know, and then the words came and, you know, and so it's a very, very difficult thing to navigate, because you have these dreams for your child in utero, you know, whether they're going to be the doctor or the lawyer or the whatever, and then you get this diagnosis, right? And so it's almost like a debt to your dream, your expectation for your child, for your family, because you don't really know where this diagnosis is going to take you. Mm-hmm. And if you meet one person with autism, you've only met one person with autism, because it's so different for every single person.
I'm glad you say that.
So
I'm glad you say that, Natasha, because that was actually my next question. When it comes to the diagnosis, is it the same for every child? And also, I'm listening to your story. You are in New York City, right?
Well, right now we are in North Carolina. We relocated about 12 years ago.
And so I'm wondering whether or not, because your story is so unique, and that's what I love about it. But I'm thinking about brown and black children who are not diagnosed at the right age. Okay. Because as I was researching this, it shows over and over that the researchers were talking about this, that early intervention do matter, right?
Yes.
And so I wanted to know, are there any unique challenges that Black and brown family have to deal with when it comes to even that? Perhaps Diana, you can jump into this as well, because when we look at the DSM, for example, there's a list of characteristics, and then, you know, and of course even that keep changing, you know, from DSM-4, DSM-5, and so on. But the DSM itself, it was written by white people for white people. So how do we maneuver through all of this to make sure that not only the children are properly diagnosed, number one, but that they are getting the proper help that they need, that are culturally sensitive to begin with?
If I can go first, from my experience as a parent, I think sometimes in our community and even in our own families, we have this stigma about a diagnosis for our children. I don't want a label placed on my child, and they go through life with this label. For me, it was like, okay, if they had told me Ethan had childhood leukemia or something, would I not want him to get help? You know, so he has autism, so I have to deal with this, you know, for his sake. So I think we as a people, we have to deal with having your child diagnosed and maybe having an autism label is not necessarily always a bad thing. And I think the second piece of it is you are your child's best advocate, right? I remember taking him to the pediatrician and mentioning some things that I was seeing, you know, like him crashing into furniture, just getting that sensory input. And at that time, I didn't understand that was what he was, you know, trying to get for himself. And a lot of times you hear, well, boys are rough, they do things like that. Or I would say, well, he's not really talking yet. You know, oh, every child develops at their own rate. Yes, but shouldn't he by now be saying at least mama or dada, you know? So I think you have to advocate for your child. And I did change that pediatrician, by the way, because, you know, sometimes they let things pass when it should be addressed. You know, and if you don't stand up for yourself and your child and do your own research, you know, and come knowing what you want to say to them and ask of them, then sometimes your child can be easily looked over. And then they miss that period of time for early intervention, like we were talking about before, and certain therapies that may be able to help them get to a better place of development. And so we're left lagging behind.
Diana?
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to answer the question. I wanted to say I have both personal and professional experience with autism, and Natasha's story like resonates so much, but it's so different. And like she said, if you've met one child with autism, you've only met that one child, because her story is not identical to mine, with the exception of how hard she had to advocate for her child. My experience with my own son, who's 10, he wasn't diagnosed, but what was happening is that I almost felt as if they wanted to label him as a bad child. And, they were, if it wasn't for me advocating for him to receive certain assessments, they would take like the things that he was doing, and they were piling it up almost as like a laundry list of, look, he did this, he did this, he did this. And that would be like, I almost PTSD picking him up from school, waiting for the teacher to tell me, what else did he do today?
Yeah.
Why else is he on red? How else did he maybe not tear up the classroom, but he did something that maybe wasn't appropriate or what have you. So it's instead of, I find another experience from the schools, there was a coach who was Black. And I explained to him, I said, hey, Malachi, that's my son. I was like, we're looking at some of his issues, and he was the PE coach. And I said, some of the behaviors that he has, this is the reason, and he said, I don't believe in that. I don't, that because he was first diagnosed with ADHD. And he said, I don't believe in that. He just needs to do what he is told that he needs to do. And he wasn't being aggressive. He was being Black. We don't believe the experience that I have is we are afraid of the diagnosis at times, and we're afraid of the stigma, and we're afraid of mental health. And it hasn't been, we're still working through the fact of trying to normalize mental health. And so as an advocate, I had to transcend that. I had to translate that from personal to professional, in that I actually teach parents how to accept their kids the way that they are. When Natasha was talking about that dream, I call it the dream deferred. From Langston Hughes, and I replay that poem in my head all the time, because it is a dream deferred.
Yeah.
Sorry. So anyway, as a professional, I try to help teach. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
It's okay.
I try to help teach parents accept their kids for who they are, and not as a cure to be taken care of, to be fixed. Because honestly, if you look at a child with autism, wherever they are along the spectrum, I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
It's okay.
You're fine.
Wherever they are along the spectrum, when you look at that child, it's always about how can we help this child accumulate to society. And so this is where we're teaching them how to be social and how to be this and how to be that. But if we were to leave this child alone and not have to accumulate to society, there would be nothing wrong with this child. Like Natasha was saying, when she was with Ethan, there was nothing really wrong with Ethan, because they've learned to be a family together. So it's when you go out into society that you have to have your child align with societal views and demands. And so that in therapy, I help parents deal with that. I don't do ABA therapy, which the ABA therapy is applied behavioral analysis. And that's what Natasha was speaking about, where they do go in depth and they help the child speak and help the child communicate appropriately to ask and not to just, and to make eye contact and to, to play alongside with, to play with kids and not parallel to kids.
Mhm.
And so that is something. And, Natasha said in New York that these services were free, but here in Florida, absolutely not.
Correct. That's the reason why I wanted us to kind of talk about this,
Yeah,
because
Florida is like,
it's
in
really hard.
Florida, you have to, I tried to get services, but you have to have a diagnosis of autism to get ABA therapy. And even after you get that diagnosis, you still have to pay for that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, I wish that's something that Florida would do, because it is a necessary service.
Well,
Yeah.
my experience in North Carolina is the same. Like I said, I have 2 children on the spectrum. So we had moved to North Carolina by now. And my second son found out that he also has autism. And it was a shock to me that a lot of these services were not free. So basically, my little guy would pocket food in his mouth. Like I would give him maybe a Cheerio for breakfast, and it would be in his mouth lunchtime after, I'm like, why isn't he swallowing? What's in your mouth? And so once he got his diagnosis, now we had to decide, do we want speech therapy or do we want occupational therapy to help with these fine motor feeding skills? And because we had to pay for both. I mean, and I'm like, what? In New York, this all came as part of the, deal to help my son. But in different states, it's different. And if you do not have that money, like I remember it was probably like $67 for a half hour of therapy. So, and you do that 3 times a week. And so now you have to decide which one is kind of more important for my son. So then I found out, well, the speech therapy can help me with some of these oral things, and I can become a therapist at home just to cut back on having to pretty much pay out of pocket so heavily for everything. Now with my second guy, I was wiser. It was not my first time on this ride, and I was older, and I knew exactly, the point of reference that I was coming from. So when I noticed certain things in him and we spoke to the pediatrician about it and there was any pushback, I would say, nope, I would like to have him assessed, because I had seen it before and I've become familiar with it, and I wasn't going to be railroaded. If it's something we have to deal with as a family, we'll deal with it as a family. But on the personal side,
Oh,
Yeah.
That's all right. She'll be back. She'll be back.
I remember I can talk about what Diana was talking earlier when her, concerning the coach, that when her child was diagnosed with ADHD. I remember my first job as a social worker in Pennsylvania. I lived in Philly and I work with children with autism. And I used to come home and tell my parents about, hey, I'm working with this kid. And, the Haitian mentality, to beat them is because they're not being disciplined. I wasn't a mother. I didn't know anything about having children. I'm like, no, Dad, it's because they don't know. It's a behavior problem. Their brain is not, you're trying to explain to them in the most minimal way for your parent to understand. It has nothing to do. It's not they being defiant. It's not that they being disobedient. It's just like their brain, the way they see things, the way they want to do things, not the way you want to do things. It's like you have to go the way they want to do it and according to what they want to do for you to know, no, beat them. I'm like, no. So after a while, I'm like, I'm not gonna tell what's going on in my job, because it was really getting me upset. And I used to go to autism walk. I had stickers in my car. Like I became a firm advocate for autism. I remember it was my first job. I worked with this little boy. His name was Brian. I'm gonna call him Brian. That's not his real name, even though I haven't worked with him for so long. And he was 4. And I remember we used to drive with him. And every time he see a letter, I see A for apple, he would never use A for apple twice. He would always find another, like A, he would always find another letter to describe A. And it's always fascinating. He was only 2. And I remember he was born with type 1 diabetes. And he had the pocket. His mom was very innovative. Like he cut the shirt to make sure that he had I forgot what you call them, but it was a device that goes in his shirt to make sure that he won't mess with it, that they put his insulin goes. So and his father, I swear autism was genetic. His dad has no social skill. Guys, when I say no social skill, the father was stoic, Caucasian. Good morning, sir. Like I'm like, well, that's where he gets it from. Like when the little boy tell you, okay, I'm done. Yeah, you could pack your bags and leave. He'll open the door and say, bye bye now. He used to call me Miss Centina. He said, bye, Miss Centina. It's time to go. And I said, okay, bye, Brian. I'll see you later. Bye. And then he slammed the door. At first, it was offensive. Like, he's rude. I'm like, no, he's not rude. He's telling me he's done. So as I learned his behavior, and I taught him, okay, when you're done, let me know. He'll pack his stuff, and he was done. So I don't know. I have a love for kids with autism. Yeah, their behavior is different. Some of them are highly aggressive, and others are so loving. Some of them will hug you, and some will become highly aggressive. But you cannot just go and touch them. I used to ask permission. Can I touch you? If he says no, I respect that. But if you say yes, I touch him, and you can't. And if one day he stare at me, look at me and say, good morning, it was the best day of my life. Because we accomplished what we worked on. And it will take a month for him to do that, to look at me and say, good morning. And when I accomplished that, it was, I worked on I got my money worth for that day. So I don't know if that was your experience, Natasha, but when I worked with him, that was the thing.
Yeah.
That we worked on.
I want to chime in and give. So my experience as a Haitian woman, as a Black person, dealing with autism, third party kind of thing, because Diana is my sister. And so Malachi is my nephew. And we come from a very, very strict background. Like, you ain't just going to say what you're going to do. You just going to do it. And there is no disrespect and such, whatever. And so it took a long time for both my husband and I want to say the family as a whole, to accept the fact that Malachi had autism. It was just one of those, Diana is so extra. Oh, it's Diana in this therapy set. She's just boy needs discipline. He needs this, he needs that. And because my son Xavier and her son Malachi are essentially just like same age. They're only a few months behind. It's like, we raise them a certain type of way. They consider themselves as siblings. That's how close we are. And I would not allow anybody else to talk to Malachi a certain way, because that's not happening. But what you're not going to do, Malachi, is disrespect, So it took us a minute to give in to the whole, okay, maybe there is something to what she is saying, because in the Haitian community, there is no mental health. There is sa malade, or they're sick, like they're crazy, or you're just disrespectful. And so learning that was a learning curve for us. And we still had to try to figure out who Malachi is and how to deal with Malachi in Malachi's world, kind of thing. The other turning point for me, I would say, is, and Natasha's not here, she just logged out, but it's something that she said was just like, this is what I've been saying. My son, hey, there she goes again. My son, Papu, had childhood cancer, leukemia. And it was a stark difference for me to see how people treated Papu versus how people treated Malachi. And at this time, Malachi is full on, there's a diagnosis, there's something mental or communicative, it's just not, he's not just being outright disrespectful. This is just, we have to learn that. And I had to tell people, no, he's not being all up in your personal space. No, he's not doing these things on purpose. This is how you have to talk to him, or just give him some grace. Whereas Papu, He had the NG tube. He had the ball head. It was immediate sympathy. It was immediate. Oh, there was no explanation needed. And it frustrated me to no end that I had to constantly explain myself for Malachi so people can give him some grace, the same type of grace they would give Papu. Because if we went to a restaurant and we ordered something and he didn't eat it, they saw him, they're like, oh, don't worry about it. We just won't. It was just like, he's a kid with cancer. But if something like that happened to Malachi, or he just, whatever it was, we would have to go over and over, like, just double down on the explanation kind of thing.
And so his height and his whole stature. He's
tall for his age. He looks like a big old gentle giant. And he's just, all in your face. And he's very, like, he's just, it's just, and he, okay, so for the viewers who tell their kids they believe in Santa Claus, if your kids are listening, turn away now. So there's no Santa Claus, we believe, right? And so the waitress said, whatever they said to Malachi, oh, is Santa coming? Looked at the lady, there's no Santa Claus. No such thing as Santa Claus. And they go to the church, there's no such thing as Santa Claus. So it's just that social decorum, that social, he just ain't got it. And we have to be like, Malachi, now it's not the time. He just tells it. There is no massaging the truth for him. So that is my and Vincent's experience with autism in the Black community and in the Haitian community. Because even still to this day, with all that's going on, Malachi is now 10. My mom still has issues accepting the fact that, Mommy, no, this is a diagnosis. This is Malachi. This is who he is. He needs to learn these things. Miss me. Maybe don't you get that? Mommy, yes, he don't like he's not these other kids. This is him. This is how he was created. New fat. No, nothing new fat. We didn't do nothing. It's just that, and it's a struggle for her. And if people who don't understand our culture were to listen to the things that she said, it would be like, so you don't like your grandson? Like, so what? Exactly. What are you saying? And it's her truly trying to understand, but still fighting, because she's old. So she has to fight. You can't teach an old dog new trick kind of thing. So she's from Haiti, so they don't understand that. And if you are acting this way, then you fall or you fool, right? You're crazy. And that's not my family. Like, no, there's no one crazy in my family. So this is not acceptable. But we're all on board with, okay, Malachi is this. And we don't give him the whole, he don't have any like, he's just this and we give him a pass. No, we know Malachi can do this, he can do this, he can do that. But things that he cannot do, we accept it for what it is. My mom, on the other hand, is just,
See, that's the thing about autism, that there isn't really a look to it. That's you're deep into the community. Like now I can kind of, tell kids who may or may not be on the spectrum, but they look like you and I do, and so if they have a behavior, people really don't expect that because they don't look like someone who, has a disability.
So
so for our community, it's really a family disease. Developmental delay that everybody has to deal with. And it's a lifelong diagnosis. So there's no cure for it. So it's not going to go away when they turn 18. Like my son is graduating from high school, my older guy, it's not going to go away. It's just something that you have to learn and navigate. And you have to kind of give your children the best opportunity to become the best that they can be, the most independent that they can be, because we're not going to live forever. And in my reasoning for having my second kid, I kind of challenged God. I said, certainly you're not going to give me 2 kids with autism. So I was so sure that my second guy was going to take care of my first guy. And then I got this diagnosis. I'm like, oh no, I'm like the classic overachiever. Now I have 2 kids with autism and they're completely different. My second guy was the behavior guy, the one who ran away, that I didn't want to take outside, that, completely brought me to my knees in tears. And my first guy just kind of went along with everything. So he was kind of the setup. And then I got the second guy and I was like, oh my gosh, but God has a plan for our children. Before they were formed in our womb, he knew them. And so we have to trust that he gave us this responsibility because he also knew that we can handle it, and it's not something that is an easy thing. It does require a lot of support from your family, from your community, from your school system, just kind of reaching out to mental health for that kind of support. And there are some kids who are so severe that you may need some respite help as a parent, so you can get a break from it. So there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. It's a very, very difficult thing to deal with, but they bring so much joy to you once you can tap in to the things that really drive them, whether it's art or music. Like my guys swim, and have participated in Special Olympic swimming, and that's been a great thing for them. So it's not all doom and dreary. It could be a really fun thing too, just to see how they think. Like I would never have thought of doing something like that, and there is support and hope. So I want to.
I'm sorry. Natasha, I want to ask you, and as well as Diana too, because you say that your son is in high school now, right?
Yeah.
And Malachi is a 10-year-old. So he's still in elementary school. Diana actually is homeschooling her buddy. And you come from New York, where all the services were free, and you had this whole community, like this whole people team. You had this whole team to help you along the way. But now you're in, where's it, North Carolina, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And so you have to pay for certain services and such. One, is it the fact that you were able to get certain services that allowed you to keep your guy in school, and how's he doing? How was it for him in elementary, middle school, and high school? And Diana, is it the lack of services that's provided for you in Florida that helped you with your decision to pull them out and make them go to homeschool? Like, what was the deciding factor for both of you and the path that you guys chose? Oh.
Dan, you're on mute.
It's a mixture of both, actually. When Malachi was in second grade, he was in a hybrid class where there was only 6 kids in the class, and he had a teacher and a co-teacher, which allowed Malachi to thrive in the areas that he needed the most help in. Then the school decided that they were going to, or the district decided they were going to pull away funding from the hybrid class and put him in a general class with 26 kids. So what they started doing was transitioning him by allowing him to go to a math class every day, and he would spend an hour in that class. So according to the school, he was great. So what they expected from Malachi was to go from a 7-person classroom with 2 teachers into a 26-person classroom with 1 teacher and have some type of progress. When I told them, well, I'm not going to keep him, I would rather homeschool him myself, the ESC director she actually said, well, why don't you give him a chance first to see how he will do, and then if it's necessary, pull him out. And I'm thinking, women, are you mad? It took so much progress to get him to where he was at. And for you to want me to put my child in a position where he would regress, that just doesn't make any kind of sense. Mm-hmm. Why would I do that to him? Mm-hmm. So it was a lack of funding in the school system. And it was also personal accountability. This is my child. I was at the school almost every day, making sure that he had what he needed. Good God. So personal accountability made me decide to pull Malachi from school so that I can take care of him the way that I needed to, because I saw the needs. And if I can be at the school every day, then I can make time for him, which, that's debatable at this point, but but it's like too often sometimes Malachi, he isn't, where he is on the spectrum, he's okay to where he can be taught from home at school, but he still required that one-on-one, or maybe a ratio of 1 to 3 student type thing, so that he can really thrive in the areas that he needs to. And for him, I feel like he's musically inclined. He loves to play the violin. He's really, really good. So, Jesus Christ.
So emotional.
Well, for me, we moved from New York when Ethan was 4. And because he already had that IEP and those services, they just kind of continued when we moved here, but more or less in a school setting.
Okay. But I wanted to go ahead and address one of the questions that was on here, on how do we navigate the disproportionate diagnosis of African American Black children with behavioral disorders versus acknowledging neuroatypical kids. So neuroatypical kids are basically kids without any diagnosis, neurological diagnosis. And for me, how I actually navigate through that is doing my own assessments. The problem that we've come across, and actually our brother is a social studies teacher, and we had a discussion where he felt like ADHD is actually used inappropriately, where he felt like they were just handing out diagnoses like candy.
Yes.
And he struggled with the fact of, I see what ADHD looks like in my nephew. But at the same time, I'm in this school, and it just seems like whenever a kid is creating issues in the classroom, when they're refusing to focus or what have you, then they'll just throw a diagnosis of ADHD. Okay, so the way that I navigate through that, again, is just really a lot of psychoeducation and helping with the kids learn how to focus, how to concentrate, and how to actually do what they need to do. Medication plays a big role in that. If the child, I don't want to say if the child is if they truly have issues, but at time medication can help. Like for Malachi with ADHD, medication helps him to stay focused. And the goal is not for him to be on medication for the rest of his life. The goal is for him to have this tool to help him get to where he needs to be. Mm-hmm. And we use that. If you had a broken leg, if a person had a broken leg, you wouldn't expect the person to just walk around without a cast or without a crutch or anything to that effect. Mm-hmm. So you need those tools so that you can be able to get to where you need. So the best way that I navigate through that is by doing my own assessments. It's by teaching these kids how to properly deal with the outside world. And then you actually are able to see if this child is really, truly just being defiant, as opposed to if this child is seriously having an issue with concentrating and focusing and impulsivity. Mm-hmm. So you can see the difference at times. And in addition to that, and I say this strongly, but I say this very lightly as well, when you have a child with behavioral issues, then you have a problem with the parents and their responses. How do you respond to your kid at home will determine, a private practice makes for a public performance. Okay. How do you deal with your kids and their behavioral issues at home? How do you respond to them? And at times it's not the fact that the parents are responding aggressively. At times the parents are so passive, or they're responding to the point where they're almost ignoring the kid. Mm-hmm. And the child feels unheard. So you're not going to hear me. You don't hear me. You don't see me. Then I'm going to act out so someone can see me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hear what I'm trying to say to you. See me, because at home you don't see me, because maybe you're working 2 jobs and it's the older brother that's watching over me.
Mm.
So that's what you have to, well, in my field, that's what I have to determine.
Yeah.
Is this an issue with a neurological issue where they're needing tools to help them navigate their world, or is it they need better responses and they need to be heard and they need to be seen? And that is the biggest problem.
And Diana, if you don't mind, I think this is so awesome. And I want to come back to that because I do have a few questions when it comes to discipline children with autism. What does that look like? And of course, Cynthia has a few questions for you guys as well. But let's take a quick break and we will be right back.
You like what you hear? Tell a friend or a family member about the conversations that are happening live on The Remedy. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with somebody that you know.
Hello again. If you are just joining us, we are talking about children with autism. Our guest is Natasha King and our beloved cousin, Diana, who is joining us from a mental health perspective as well. But she's also a mother of children with autism. So the question I wanted to ask, because we are kind of talking about it, but not talking about it. How do you determine? Because I know children, as children, children do things. All right, children hate each other. Children have bad days, just like grown-ups have bad days. How do you discipline a child with autism? What are some of the things that if a parent was watching the show today, um, um, how do we respond as outsiders? Because sometimes I think we tend to um, um, pass a judgment, whether it's to the parents or to the kid. Let's say I'm on the subway or whatever, and I'm seeing a child that's acting up, and all of a sudden I'm the expert. I want to tell the parent what she should do or what he should do to discipline that kid, not knowing what's really going on in the kid's life or what's really going on in that family's life. What would you say to us on the outside looking at this? Yeah, what would you want to say to us? Not necessarily how do you discipline your kids, but what would you want to say to us looking at this from the outside?
That's a loaded question. um, I have seen parents so kind of embarrassed by this diagnosis, and you never really know what your child is going to say or do at any given time. That they buy a shirt that may say, I'm not misbehaving, I have autism on it. And I thought about buying that for my little guy because he was the one that was going to take me out. He was something, and he's gotten a lot better now. But you have to do what is best for your child. If my child is in a situation where I know he's overstimulated, it's just too much going on for him.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to leave an event early, like a birthday party or whatever, then we just leave and go. I feel like I don't necessarily have to explain it to anybody, but there are people who will give you those looks, and that's okay for them to do that. And you can say, my son has autism, and right now it's just too much going on for him. I don't know that you can necessarily discipline in the sense of traditional discipline, because do they really understand, why you may be disciplined? But you try to reinforce that positive. But what was a better way that you can do this? Instead of falling on the floor, can you ask for help? Or if you wanted more of something, can you say more or ask for more? So you have to kind of think of different ways to get that child to respond to you and for you to fill that need. So discipline it looks totally different in the autistic world than it would with a typically developing child.
Yeah, of course, I absolutely agree with Natasha. But with the fact that I grew up in a very strict Haitian household,
Yes, stop. Speak on it. Stop.
so it started off with what my sister said earlier is because I was getting so much backlash from my family with you're not disciplining him enough. It was like, what more is there left for me to do? Like I am doing everything that I could possibly think to keep this kid from acting like he's lost his mind. And so at when I found out that he may be on the spectrum, it was first an inclination. I was like, maybe he's on the spectrum. I put everybody on notice. He's getting tested, so there will be no disciplinary tactics being done at this time because we need to make sure that we know is he doing this on purpose or can he not help himself? So at this moment, there will be no disciplining done at this time. Now, what I do say for Malachi is that I set expectations and I give him boundaries. And one of the expectations that I had is respect. Malachi is verbal and he understands. And so it was actually it was mandatory for Malachi that he showed respect to his teachers. There was this one time where he was really upset with the teacher and he threw his chair or he yelled in her face and he said no. He was like, no. And he threw a paper. He just did something. He became chaotic. And I explained to him that behavior is unacceptable. Nothing about that interaction was necessary. And there still is a level of respect that you have to give to people, regardless of how you are feeling. If you're not able to deal with the emotions. Now, because I am a therapist, Malachi's discipline will always look different than a lay person, a parent.
Non-therapeutic parent, yeah.
Right. They don't have the tool. Like Malachi speaks therapeutic verbiage. He won't say I was a bad child. He'll say I made a bad choice. You know, I've taught him from the very beginning, okay, well, let's use some coping strategies. Let's use this. And he'll tell you, I didn't use my coping skills. I needed to breathe. I counted to 10. So I taught him the skills that he needed. And so at this point, his discipline mirrors, what it looks like is what could you have done to change this? What could you have done to change how this happened? Because I know you have all the tools in your tool belt. I know you do because I put it there. So what can you do or what? And then I'll always ask this important question that parents do not ask their kids. How can I help you?
Yeah.
Something is happening and you cannot deal with it on your own. And this is for every kid. A tantrum is not because they're not getting what they want. A tantrum is because they're not being heard. And the best way that they can make you see them is to throw a tantrum. We as adults throw tantrums. You know, when we're at a store and we're not being heard, we're not being seen, we start to, we get all whatever. A tantrum. Right? Exactly. So it's really important to ask your kid, and as young as soon as they're able to understand, how can mommy help you right now? I see you're upset. I see you're sad. I see you're crying. How can mommy help you right now? And if my sister was on here, I know she hates this, but then I always ask them, do you need a hug? I do. She hated that. But then as a Haitian household, a hug, if you don't go get a belt, a hug, they don't know.
I agree with you, Miss Diana. I'm and you don't really hug in the Caribbean community unless you're traveling and going away for a long time and you're not going to see them or they're really sick. So I tell people, you don't really hug in the Caribbean community, or how Americans say "I love you" all day long to each other. That's just something that you don't necessarily do all the time. And so it's so ironic that I would have two boys who hug all the time.
Mhm.
Like, okay, God, this is you talking to me here, you know. But it's if you ever have a chance to read, it's just a little book that we read for preschoolers all the time. It's called No David. And everything this little kid does, you know, his mom is like, no, David. And that's kind of like what my life was having. And when I was a toddler, it's like, no, Evan, you know. And you come from a place of love all the time because you want to respect them as a human being. You want to always make sure that you're allowing them to have that dignity that they deserve, but you also have to rein them in, you know, because they can go far and beyond. But it's a tough thing to navigate. You always feel like, you know, it's constantly evolving, parenting a child on the spectrum. And with this, the space that I have of 8 years is very different. Parenting a high schooler than someone in fourth grade. And so it changes all the time. You know, it's not one a parent that you can parenting style where you can sit back and just let them do their own thing. You find yourself becoming very, very involved. Like you almost become a therapist because you learn so much from so many different people. And so you're able to kind of foster that kind of care that your child needs, and you get to know them really, really well, and things that may trigger a behavior, and you just try to avoid, you know, certain things for them, and it means taking away a lot from your own family and your own dreams, things that you may have planned as a couple for your family. Just because it's too much on your own children. I remember going to church and I would go by myself because not that my children weren't invited, but I felt bad if they were making too much noise or causing too much havoc. And so my husband would stay home with them and I would go, and then I would come home and share what happened at church. So it's a hard thing to navigate. You know, like I said, it's not like a disability or disease where you can see it as a child walks in. And so you expect them to behave differently, but they don't always have those skills to do that. And so it's hard to kind of get other people to understand.
And Natasha, if I may, both you and let me see if I can change my screen here for a little bit. Yeah, so both you and Diane kind of talk about something that is dear to my heart, and that is as human beings, we are the product of our environment, but we also have the ability to break the cycle. And what I mean by that is just because you were raised one way doesn't mean you have to continue to, now that you become a parent, to raise your children that way. We talk about how, you know, in the Haitian culture or in the Caribbean, how, you know, everything, you know, if you're not behaving, there's a bell for that. Period. It doesn't matter what your diagnosis is, there's a bell for that. But one of the viewer, or someone who's watching, Angie Foster, say, she mentioned, you know, we are um, a lack of knowledge in this area. That's why it's so difficult, and it's so true. But I always say this: the more you know, the more the greater your responsibility. And so when you know what's going on with your child, when you understand what's going on with your child, you have to react differently. You can't continue to act the same way your parents did because they had lack of knowledge, but you have the knowledge. So we have to break that cycle. And it's very important. And I always try to tell people, listen, you have to deal with each child as if that was the only kid you had. And deal with their behavior and understand that child as if that was the only kid. Because as Natasha, maybe you can testify to that, you can have two kids with autism and they are as different as they are, right? So what works for one child may not necessarily work for another child. I want to see if you could switch up just a little bit, because I didn't hear much about the stigma that is associated with having children with autism. What are some of the things that you guys experience, whether it was from other professionals or whether it was from people in the church or people in the streets? in respect to dealing with a child with autism? Maybe it's the look that you used to get at the grocery store or at the supermarket or at the mall. How did you deal with that? And especially, you mentioned, Natasha, how you had to make a decision not to bring your kids to church because their behavior may be considered disruptive to the service. How did your church community dealt with having kids with autism?
They were very responsive. My older guy was able to come and sit through a service, and even when we had kitchen duty, would go back there and help me and help serve and different things. But my younger guy just couldn't do it for very long.
Mhm.
And so it's nothing that they did. They were always very supportive of them. It's just kind of a decision I made because I didn't really want to disrupt the entire service every time. So sometimes he would be okay enough to take him to the baby room where I can kind of listen into the service. But you know, God made this guy. He made him, and he knows him so well, and he doesn't necessarily have to sit in the four walls of a church to have a relationship with God. And so that was kind of a decision that I made, and just kind of interceding on his behalf. Lord, please forgive him, you know, and just whenever, my biggest thing is whenever my husband and I pass away, what will happen to them? So we know that we have that church family support and our family support. It's a lot. It's a lot for people on the outside looking in. You know, just like in any public setting, you always feel like you may have to explain it to them. And I kind of wait to decide, do I say that he's autistic or do I just let them find out, you know? So it's always kind of something that weighs on you a lot as a parent of an autistic child. A lot of people are more responsive now because when my first son was diagnosed, it was 1 in 125 kids. And that was 18 years ago. Now it's 1 in 54 kids who will be diagnosed on the spectrum. 4.5 times more boys than girls. So people are seeing it a lot more. And the thing is, if we don't give these supports and these interventions early, as a society, we're going to have to spend more money to give those interventions and supports as these children grow older and into adulthood. So we have to learn to accept it and work with parents and families and just, you know, support them as much as you can. It's a difficult thing. It's a lifelong diagnosis. And 1 in 54, that's very telling. You go to any school now and these autistic rooms are filled with children on the spectrum. So I think now that people are seeing it more, it's becoming a little easier for us to navigate as parents.
Thank you, Natasha.
Okay, I have a question. It's two-part question. So the first part question is for you both. I know both of your sons, Natasha, and for you as well, Diana, are not as aggressive. And maybe for a viewer, their child is extremely aggressive. What say you when it comes at a certain age that you have to put them in a home where you no longer can be the caretaker? You know, sometimes it comes to that point where they become to the point that, you know, they become violent, where you no longer have the capacity to manage the behavior, where you have to, you know, to take them to that place. How, you know, if somebody is watching who's in that situation, what advice can you give them? And that's my first question. And after you answer that, I ask my second question.
I would say that's a hard thing to do. Because you never really want to feel like you're giving up on your child, right? But you love them so much that you still have to continue to do what is best for them at that time. So you may have been able to take care of them up to a certain point, but now you have to look for a different way to care for them. And that's a hard thing, but it doesn't mean that you love them any less.
Mhm.
It means that you love them so much that you have to make this hard decision for them, and that you will continue to support them in any way that you can. But like I said, if it were any other diagnosis, you would do the very best that you can for them. And
Yeah.
so you have to look at it in that sense, and remove some of that weight and that guilt that you may be feeling when you have to make that hard decision.
Diane?
Yeah.
I would also say do it sooner rather than later. The longer that you wait to get help in that manner, the more aggressive the child will become with less intervention. When we talk about early intervention, that's part of it as well, because you'll have this child that is aggressive, and it will only but escalate if he or she does not get the help that they need to communicate better, communicate their needs and their wants a lot better without getting aggressive. So the sooner the better. And also to the facilities, these facilities have have the ability to have these kids in the facility, there's visitation. I mean, I know it's not the same, but like Natasha said, had the child needed to go to the hospital, you wouldn't think twice. And so that's what this is as well.
Okay. Thank you. And my second question is, I know autism is in a spectrum and there's different form of autism. Is Tourette's a form of autism? I remember I had a professor who had Tourette's. And why is it everyone that has Tourette's have to use profanity to express themselves? Like, I never understood why.
They don't.
But
Tourette's is not. Tourette's is Tourette's is its own diagnosis.
okay.
And it possibly is tied to anxiety, but not autism. You could have Tourette's and autism. Like, you can have autism and other things.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes it's more prevalent because of the underlying things that are going on. You'll see that someone with autism doesn't just have autism. For example,
that bipolar schizophrenia. Yeah.
There's others. Yeah. And so, like, for example, Malachi has pica, and pica is basically where you ingest uningestible items.
Okay.
Things that are not supposed to be digested. You're eating things, and or you're picking at your scabs and stuff like that. So, or you're pulling at your hair, your eyebrows, what have you. So you'll have different diagnoses. You can have a multitude of diagnoses alongside autism.
Yeah, and I think Tourette's is probably more in the speech communication bracket, as well as, that psychological part of it. But autism, it can, you're correct, Diana, it can come with an attachment of so many other things: seizures, sensory processing disorders, receptive and expressive language difficulty, that social awkwardness sometimes. So it's the autism diagnosis, but there's so many parts to that puzzle. Very, very deep and in depth. Yeah.
Thank you.
As I listen to you, I can help to understand this, but to also say that having a child with autism sounds like to me a full-time job all by itself. So I want to know, as we are getting to the end of our program today, when we talk about self-care, what are some of the things that you guys have in place to help you out so that you don't become burnout? Or what do you do to make sure that you are mentally sane as you continue to raise your children to the best of your ability?
Therapy. You need therapy. I have a therapist. I can't deal with this on my own. So yeah. No, but therapy, that self-care for me is hard, in that not that I don't trust people with my kids, but because of the stigma and because of how people treat kids with autism, I only have select few people that I will leave my kids with. And I think that's just 2 people right now, right? And so if I go somewhere, they go somewhere. And so self-care for me would probably be, putting the kids to bed at night a little bit earlier so I can spend some time by myself or maybe hang out with a neighbor or what have you. But all jokes aside, with therapy, that is one of the things that I would always recommend, because you need someone you need to be able to speak the truth about your circumstances without fearing how that truth would look like if you say it in front of your kids. It's not always rainbows and butterflies, as you know, and it is a full-time job. And there are times that it's really, really hard. And so it's exhausting, and you probably need to vent to someone else and let them know how exhausting it is, because saying that it's exhausting, the child can interpret that as my mom doesn't love me or my mom is tired of me. So being able to have an outlet is important.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Diana. I lean heavily on my immediate family. Like you say, it's a very small circle of people that you feel like you can trust who really know your children. Also, I have a handful of really, really good friends that I call and I talk with when I feel like I need that. I know for some parents, they do have respite care. So sometimes in the afternoons, on the weekends, someone else takes the child to do an activity while you get a breather, or you get to go shopping and not worry about a child running away from you, things like that. I also kind of focused on having my children be as independent as possible, to take some of that off of me and my husband. So I've taught my older son how to do his laundry a long time ago. He knows how to make certain meals, and, just teaching them little life skills so that it can free you from just having that burden and that responsibility all the time. So making time for yourself, that's very important, and just kind of planning how you're going to do things so that, you can continue to be your best you, so you have something left to give to them, because it is a 24-hour job.
Yeah.
The independence part, Natasha, I absolutely agree with you. If my kids were not independent, it would just be too much. Like I just have so many different things to allow them to do. Make your own breakfast. Here's a toaster. Here's how to use it. I purchased a cereal dispenser. Here's the cereal. Here's how to use it. So making your child independent. And I say with Malachi, so this is Malachi. Malachi, say hi.
Hi.
Hi, Malachi.
Hi, Malachi.
Hi,
You're so handsome. Aww.
So Malachi, I will say because of the atmosphere, because of the times that we're living in now, I have one of my biggest fears is that Malachi will be stopped, and he won't understand the appropriate way to deal with and manage him being stopped because of the lack of boundaries that he at times have. So what I always say is I teach. There's this meme that says, "Mom, you taught me how to do everything, but you never taught me how to live without me, how to live without you." And that is what I prepare Malachi for. Like, I prepare him to be his own advocate, and I prepare him to defend himself, and I prepare him to be independent. Like, he walks the dog. Now, we have certain points in the neighborhood where I have certain neighbors, friends that I can ask them, "Hey, Malachi's walking by you. Can you make sure he's okay?" So he also knows certain houses that if case there's an issue, you can stop at this house. I've taught him how to look out for the unmarked vans and to be vigilant and I do that. And I know that at times it could be viewed as being dangerous, which it is actually, because he's 10. But at the same time, I have to teach him how to be that independent person, how to be vigilant on his own without mommy being vigilant for him. I need him to be aware. And so I teach him to protect himself, because as much as I love you, my love cannot save you. So I have to teach you how to be that person for yourself.
I agree with you, Diana. Safety is on the forefront of every parent's mind, especially when you have a brown child. And, with autism, there's a case right now of Elijah McLean,
Yes.
who was just walking home from the store and somebody thought he looks different, was doing something different, just swinging his bag with his iced tea, and they called the police, and it did not work out well for Elijah, and he ended up dying. And it's a case that I'm following because I said, well, that could be Ethan. He turned 18. What if he, is stopped or accosted? Will they understand that he's autistic? So it works in your mind constantly. It weighs on your heart all the time because the day will come and you won't be here any longer to care for them. And the only thing you can do is lean on God and hope that you did all the things to the best of your ability that you could do to have your children, be in a place where they can care for themselves, and to have one of my prayers that I always say is, God, please put the right people in place at the right time for what my children need. And he has always been faithful in putting the right people in place, whether it's the school, to the therapist, to the doctors. And as we go forward in this life, I will keep saying that prayer as they get older and have to go out on their own, because it is a real true fear that I have for them, and I would hate to see it end badly for them, knowing that it's because they were misunderstood.
And finally, I just want to ask.
I just wanted to say one last thing.
Yeah.
And I think this is relevant for all kids, really, neurotypical and all. And this might be too much for some kids, but, I had Malik, I sat with him and I watched the movie When They See Us. And I made sure that he understood what was important, in watching that movie, and also understanding that, because my sister, as you know, she's an attorney. So what I had him practice and when I had him memorize is her name and her number, not Tati. And if you get stopped, you don't ask for mommy. You need to ask for your attorney. And what is your attorney's name? And what is her number? And you don't ask for me because your attorney will find your mom. You call the attorney. You call your lawyer because you have a lawyer. That was the one thing that I taught him, and it's so important because in the incident of the Central Park 5, the one thing that I was able to recognize is the lack of advocacy that the kids had for themselves. They did not know how to advocate for themselves. They didn't know how to ask. The parents didn't know how to advocate for themselves. So the one thing that I taught him was like, you don't ask for me. Do not ask for me because I will find you. Ask for your lawyer. Your lawyer will get you, because he can be 21 and then he's going to ask for his mom. They're not going to give him his mom.
Yeah.
So he needs to be 10, getting stopped by the cops and saying, I have an attorney. This is her name and I know my rights. So I think that's really important, that as a Black family, that's a big takeaway in advocating, because we don't teach our kids. We always teach our kids to stay with us, hold my hands, watch out for, stay with me. If I'm in the front, that's where you are. But we don't teach our kids how to handle it when they do get kidnapped. We always teach our kids not to get kidnapped, but what happens when they do get kidnapped? And that's what I teach Malachi. This is what happens when you do get kidnapped. This is what happens when we do get separated. And it's a hard reality that I had to come across, not because he was Black, but because he's autistic.
Yeah.
Because when they see him, they're not going to see a child with autism. They're going to see this 15-year-old kid who really isn't 15 with an emotional capacity of a 5-6-year-old.
Yeah.
So that's what they see. Yeah. And that's what I feel as a Black family, we do need to teach our kids, how do we deal with the aftermath?
This is so powerful, guys. Wow. My last question to both of you is going to require for you to be a little bit more vulnerable. Have
You
you
mean
ever
what Aaron was?
yes,
Okay.
already known Hollywood. And the question I do have is, did you ever at some point ask God, why me? And how did you handle the answer to that question? How did you fight with God with that question?
Um, to be honest, I have asked. Especially the second time around. It's like, again, come on, giving this to somebody else, like, why me? Why me again? And everybody I talked to say, you're so great. You're a great autism mom, and this and that. And just the work that goes into it, it's so much, but why not me? Maybe he saw it fit to use me in this way. And I don't think that my work is done, because there's so many things I want to do for the autism community, especially as my son is getting older and going into the workforce, in college and adulthood. So I've wrestled with God, and I've had to just accept that this is what his plans were. And I may not understand it here and now, but he has given me the tools to be the best parent that I have, given the circumstances that we're in with our two children being autistic. And I'm just going to trust that this is all going to work out. If I keep questioning and wondering about it, it just weighs too much on me. So I just have to continue to move forward, to trust that he's going to continue to lead us in the right direction. And that, like I said, he will always put the best people in place for my children. So I have to accept the challenge and accept that this is what God gave to me. Everybody has something going on that we may not know about. Mine is, I have two children with autism, and it's brought me a lot of joy too, just to see them meet milestones and goals. It hasn't always been this thing that's been so heavy on me. There's also been a measure of joy. And I'm a planner, so in my mind, I thought my life would go a certain way, and it made a complete 180. But that's okay. This is where God wanted me to be and what He wanted me to do, and so I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah, thank you, Tasha.
I never questioned God, but I did have some guilt. Malachi obviously was supposed to be here. Really, really quick, when I was pregnant with Malachi, I did take a plan B. It clearly didn't work. And when I was, I think maybe 3 months pregnant, I actually started contracting. I was 17 weeks and I started contracting early. My cervix was getting shorter, so I had to stay in the hospital on bed rest for 3 months to give Malachi a chance to survive. So there are sometimes there's that guilt of, well, did I do something that I shouldn't have did to create this issue for him? Was that plan B not supposed to be, so sometimes there's that guilt where I question, well, maybe it's the things that I did prior to or during my pregnancy that may have caused the issue. But I will say I am who I am today because of Malachi. I think God placed me in certain life situations so that I can be the mom. So I can be his mom. So that I can fulfill my assignments. We all have our cross to bear. And like Natasha said, that this is mine. And I just think that there's just so many things that are placed in your life. I never really wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to be a teacher, but I don't think as a teacher, I would have been the best. I wouldn't have been able to fulfill my assignment to Malachi if I was a teacher. So this assignment that I was given by God to raise him is an amazing assignment. And it's been a very, 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 very rough journey, but it hasn't always been bad. There's like 90% amazingness
Yeah.
among the tornadoes. So it's like I call it, it's just a dream, it's just dream deferred, because I wanted my kid to like do everything. If I was,
Hmm.
when you have your kid, they're gonna do everything. But this is my kid and he still does everything. He's an amazing kid. He just doesn't do it the way that I wanted it done. He does it the way that he needs it done. So
Yeah. As I was listening to both of you, I am grateful that neither one of you say, well, God was punishing me.
oh,
There are
ju-
people who feel, when things like that happen to you, it's a form of punishment for something you did or past sin or whatever. And I'm glad that both of you in your relationship with God, you understand that that's not the way God operates. Uh,
right.
in fact, I love the way you put it. He gave you an assignment,
Hmm.
and it's beautiful. Listen, I wanna take this moment to publicly say how grateful I am, to both of you, to Natasha King, and let me bring her back in. Natasha, I just wanted to take a moment to say to you and to Diana how proud and how wonderful it was to have both of you on the show today. You guys brought so much onto the forefront of what autism is and what does it look like. Hey, this is your
Hey,
son.
This
Ethan.
is
Hi,
my older
Ethan. Hi.
guy.
Hey.
Hi, Ethan.
Hi.
I don't think he remembers me. Hi, Ethan.
I'm sure that was a long time ago.
I
Yeah,
know.
The other guy he's always on the move.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. For anybody in this situation, I would say just be your child's best advocate. If you think that there may be something going on, it's okay to ask them to have their child tested and assessed.
Mhm.
And God doesn't give us more than we can bear. Obviously, we have broad shoulders, so He thought we could bear this. And
Yeah.
I've learned so much from it and have been able to help so many people along the way. So He continues to use me, and I'm happy to be used in this way.
Amen. Amen. And so with this, I want to say once again, thank you, to all of you, the member of the remedy, and to Diana and Natasha. Listen, Natasha, this is our first time on the show,
Yeah.
but you are now officially part of the remedies family.
Thank
And
you.
so before you leave, I want to pray for both of you and to all of our viewers, those of you who are watching, whether on YouTube or on Facebook, we want to say thank you for giving us a moment of your time where we can share stories about what's really going on in the lives of the people around you, your neighbors, and your neighborhood. Father God, we just want to say thank you so much for trusting us, with these skills to be able to raise up children who are diagnosed with this disease. Lord, I ask that you will be with Diana, that with Natasha, that you will continue to empower them and give them the tools that are necessary to do the best that they can to raise those children in the way that will be pleasing to you. Please protect them. Sometimes, Father God, they may feel that they are all alone, but may you be that person for them. May you be that extra shoulder that they need to, and give them the support that they need as they continue in their journey with you. Thank you for the Remedies family. Thank you for all of our listeners and the viewers who came and watched our show today. I hope that maybe someone, who was watching the show today was blessed because of what was said and done today. We love you. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, family.
Amen.
We appreciate you. We love you. And we'll invite you. Obviously, Diane, you will always be invited to back on the remedy. Have a wonderful afternoon and stay
Bye.
safe and God bless you all. Bye,
You
everyone.
too. God bless. Thank you.
Bye bye.